Lake Spirit. A lithe green body rushes over roots and arches over waves, its writhing green hair soaked in glass and in foam. Green weaves through and dodges currents, up and then down. It somersaults, tumbling over waterfalls into a lake, reaching past ripples and embracing the bubbles. A murky cloaked creature diving to depths. Deep in the water, it dodges swift moonlight strikes. Down, down, the green falls, hair streaming back like a lifeline, to the surface, to moonlight, to nowhere. It hides in the forests of pondweed. In Washington, the water weighs everything down. It creates a horizon line that everything sinks to meet. It softens the edges and saturates the colors. The world is in constant motion, the currents of water flowing just beneath the surface at all times. It courses through the veins of leaves, over the stones, and falls from the great gray clouds overhead. Those waters above create an even, monochrome background, so white sometimes that I could take a pen to it and draw sweeping black lines on the sky, cursive poetry that ducks behind the silhouettes of trees long before it reaches the final stanza. Even where the water is still, it is alive. My family often jokes that you have to keep walking in the Pacific Northwest, because if you stay still too long, you'll grow moss. The little roots dig into the ground and come up soft, cushioning the sodden ground with little acid green stars. When I wrote my poem, Lake Spirit, I wanted to juxtapose the concrete and the fantastical, to construct a narrative that blended the two. The little green thread in a river could be a weed uprooted and slipping away downstream, or a spirit rolling and diving through the currents. Water was a link between the two realities, perfectly suited to such a role due to its life-giving qualities. It was the agent of change that swept life into new shapes. My own life was in constant flux there, and each new year, each new cycle, the drizzle of winter, the storms of spring, I found myself a new person. In California, the sunlight pulls everything up. Corners grow sharp, and plants tower and spike. Fans of pale blue agave reach up towards the sky and flourish without a drop of water, living only on the clear blue sky above, a sky that would never hold the ink from a pen. The plants, still towering over me, but now in such strange arcs, are abundant, but silent and still. Their tough, dry forms do not bend for the wind, but stay in place, as though the slightest movement would crack them. Shapes, however dramatic, are frozen in time, solitary statues whose only changes come from the slip of light over their surfaces. Sandy soils stretch out beneath the peaks of rock mountains that encircle this new world. The water here sinks into the ground, not vice versa, and dry leaves crumble and crack rather than slowly melting away under the dissolving power of rainfall. The world seems static here, long since dried in place without water to change its face. It seems as though we balance on the crust of a world that we can chip away at and carve, but that will never move of its own volition, as though there simply isn't any blood below the surface to soften it. Or, at least, that is how it appeared to me, disembarking from a plane, knowing this would be my home for the next 4 years. The land is beautiful and strange, but it's also disconcerting. Where is the water? And do we all dry out and become motionless without it? I came to California as a student, having spent my high school years in the constant state of change that I joked prevented moss growth, and in reality was simply the product of an abundance of enthusiasm and curiosity. In college, I hoped I could focus that enthusiasm, and so I left the fogs of Washington behind for a drier climate. I immediately noticed the lack of water, expected on a vacation, but not mid-autumn as I studied for tests and Halloween approached. It just wasn't fall yet if the rain wasn't pounding incessantly on the window panes, but the rain never came. The little standing water I saw, flowing along the sides of roads or along the edges of banks, originated in sprinklers and fountains. It was artificial and pumped from far away, just as oddly metallic as the tap water it took me weeks to get used to. But that was how it was supposed to be. We were in the desert, and in the desert there isn't any water, right? No. There's water everywhere, just a good deal less of it. The plants are pulsing with it, the liquid lending them their soft green color. It deposited fossils here long ago, and it hides under the surface in aquifers. The springs they feed go unnoticed or covered up despite their history as the sources of life for the plants, which come up greener where the water lurks below the surface. Water shapes the entire land, currents pulling the sands and mountains down towards the ocean, an expansive movement towards the coast, undertaken by the entire Santa Ana watershed as new lands come to take their place. Watersheds are defined by the highest peaks in the area, which offer borders that hem in the expanse of land that feeds water into the lowest body of water. Here, those highest peaks are the San Gabriel Mountains, high over Claremont. Rainfall anywhere in this area is swept downward to the Santa Ana River, and from there onto the sea. My eyes slip almost daily towards Mount Baldy to see which direction is north, and which direction is a little to its left, and points towards my sodden home state. That same mountain is constantly shedding rain and melted snowfall from its sides, the constant motion of water pulling little changes into the face of the land. Little changes pile on top of each other to become larger ones, and the land evolves. Water is always running, and we're always running towards water. Its pull is like gravity, taking every particle of sand in a mountaintop and removing it to somewhere new and far away. It takes humans by the heart and the mind's eye and swings them along too, not only necessary for life, but an object of fascination. We place fountains in our gardens and watch the rain fall outside the windows. It is ever present in our lives, in the world around us, and in our bodies. Change is constant, and like the towering plants that reach high enough to puncture the very sky, fueled by water hidden deep below, I will continue to move, because there's no such thing as stillness. I move between homes now, from where the water glides along the surface and rounds off the edges of the world, to where it shifts the world subtly, the same water circling a system and being swept up by the plants that harness it. And so many plants are able to do so.
The plant life that calls Southern California home is myriad and diverse. Alongside the soft-furred sage and rounded cacti that I expected, little apple-green leaves of ground cover stretch under oak trees that expand like icebergs, both above and below the ground. The majestic oak at Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Gardens is about 300 years old, and its twisted branches have used the time to create a canopy of lacquered leaves that envelops the ground beneath it and claims the water it can find for itself. Squirrels collect acorns in the dappled light. But in the gardens, a mere few hundred feet away, is a grove of uncut palms, the dead leaves hanging off their bony spines like sheaths of feather dusters. Though they look as though they could belong to different planets, the trees coexist here in the sun. The plants that can snag water as it works its way to the river live here in great numbers, if not as great abundance, as the berries and evergreens of my own home. Water lies under the skin of Southern California, changing it and molding it over time. It holds the element of fascination that water holds everywhere, more so for its rarity. With this in mind, I felt that there should be a second version of my poem. Water is not only the spirit of the rivers and forests, but of the sands and mountains as well. Desert Spirit. A folded form shudders, hanging in gray skies high above the ground. With a growl of thunder, it tumbles to earth and slips beneath the sands, splitting and shedding as it sinks deeper and spreads out among the grains. One thread hitting a root and sliding into the veins of an oak tree, allowing the roots to grow deeper and the canopy wider, calling more droplets to join it along a vast net. Another ensconcing itself in the loose flesh of a cactus to wait until a dry day, yet more collecting the grains to themselves and pulling them downward, to underground pockets, to rocky plates, to the ocean, slowly but always moving the desert.